Everyone thought I made the wrong choice. My index funds disagree. I have been reading this thread for about 3 months. Someone in my department shared it at a staff meeting of all places, said it had stories worth hearing. She was right. Here is mine. Hi, my name is Claire. Names changed for privacy. I am 34 years old. I live in Spokane, Washington, in a house I own. I teach high school art. I earn $58,000 a year. I have a net worth just north of $300,000, and I am on track to reach financial independence before I turn 45. I want to let that sit for a moment before I keep going, because I know what some people are thinking. Art teacher, Spokane, $300,000. Those things do not go together in most people's mental picture of what a financially successful life looks like. That mental picture is wrong, and I am going to tell you exactly why. I grew up in Spokane. My parents, Martin and Diane, were practical people in the specific way that people become practical when they have worked hard their whole lives and seen what happens when things go sideways. My father was an accountant. My mother managed a dental practice. They were not wealthy, but they were stable, and they had opinions about what stability required, and those opinions did not include a career in the arts. I have two older siblings. My brother David went into software engineering in Seattle. My sister Kristen went into pharmaceutical sales. Both of them make significantly more than I do. Both of them have been making significantly more than me for over a decade. David and Kristen are smart and hardworking, and they chose paths that made sense for them. The part that became complicated was not that they made more money than me. It was that they assumed making more money meant they were building more than me, and for a long time they said so out loud. When I told my family I was getting my teaching certificate instead of going into marketing, accounting, medical, or literally anything they considered financially viable, my mother asked if I had thought it through. My father said teachers did not make enough to live on. David said it was a waste of my talent. Kristen said I would regret it when I was 40 and still renting. I was 22. I smiled and I said I appreciated their concern, and I went ahead and did it anyway. Not out of stubbornness, out of calculation. Here is the calculation I had already done. I had been interested in personal finance since I was 19, not because anyone taught me, because I had watched my parents stress about money in ways that did not match their income, and I wanted to understand the gap. I also thought, because I am my father's daughter, that working with numbers might just be a natural ability. I started reading. Not textbooks. Blogs, forums, books written by people who had actually figured it out. I found the concept of index fund investing. I found the math behind compound interest. I found the FIRE movement, which stands for Financial Independence, Retire Early, and I found the specific version of it that applied to people with modest incomes in lower cost of living areas. The math was not complicated. It just required consistency and time and a willingness to live below your means. I did the math on teaching in Spokane versus almost any creative or corporate job in Seattle. The Seattle salary was higher. The Seattle cost of living was dramatically higher. The gap between income and expenses, which is the only number that actually matters for building wealth, was often smaller in Seattle than it would be in Spokane on a teacher salary. Spokane's housing was affordable. Spokane's cost of living was manageable. A teacher salary in Spokane left real margin if you were intentional about it. I also looked at the benefits: a Washington state teacher pension, summers that could be used for additional income or for creative work, job stability that most corporate positions did not offer, and a career I would actually want to show up to every day, which I had decided mattered to me after watching people I knew burn out in jobs they tolerated for salaries they spent as fast as they earned them. I chose Spokane. I chose teaching. I chose it deliberately, and I have never once regretted it. I started teaching at 23. My first year salary was $41,000. The first thing I did after setting up my classroom was open a Roth IRA and set up an automatic contribution. Then I enrolled in my school district's supplemental retirement account, a 403(b), and set my contribution to 15% of my salary. I lived in a small apartment, and I cooked almost everything I ate, and I did not have a car payment, and I did not carry a credit card balance. I was not depriving myself. I was just not spending money on things that did not matter to me, so I could have more of the things that did. Every dollar I invested went into low-cost total market index funds, not individual stocks, not complicated strategies. Index funds that tracked the entire market, charged almost nothing in fees, and historically returned somewhere between 7 and 10% annually over long periods of time. I set the contributions to automatic, so I never had to make the decision again. The money moved before I could see it. I also picked up work in the summers, teaching art camps through the city parks department, commissioned murals for local businesses, 3 of which are still on buildings in downtown Spokane, selling prints of my work through an online shop I set up in my 2nd year of teaching. None of it made me rich, all of it went directly into investments. At 26, I bought my house, a 3-bedroom Craftsman in a neighborhood I liked, walking distance to a coffee shop and a park and a decent grocery store. The mortgage was $1,200 a month. I had saved the down payment over 3 years by treating it like a bill I paid to myself first every month. David called me when I told the family about the house. He was living in a 1-bedroom apartment in Capitol Hill in Seattle and paying $2,200 a month for it. He made almost 3 times my salary. He said he was happy for me. He also said Spokane was not exactly a thriving market. I told him I was not buying it as a market. I was buying it as a home that I could afford to own outright someday. He said that was a very teacher way to think about it. I said, thank you. The years between 26 and 32 were quiet in the way that building something quietly is quiet. I went to work, I taught kids who sometimes cared about art and sometimes did not, and either way, I showed up. I painted on weekends, I contributed to my retirement accounts every month without exception. I watched the balance grow in this specific, slow way that compound interest grows, imperceptibly at first, and then faster than you expect. I also read continuously, books on personal finance, blogs by people who had hit financial independence on ordinary incomes, research on the psychology of spending. I wasn't obsessive about it, I just stayed educated and stayed consistent and stayed out of the lifestyle inflation that I watched eat every raise my siblings got. David got a significant promotion at 30. He texted the family group chat about it. His new salary was $140,000. Everyone congratulated him. My mother asked if he was going to buy a place now. He said, maybe next year. Next year came and went. The market was too expensive, then it got more expensive, then he got a new car, then he took 2 international trips, then he moved to a nicer apartment. His salary kept going up. His savings did not seem to move based on things he complained about. Kristen was in a similar position. Good salary, great lifestyle, not much underneath it. She had a 401k she contributed just enough to get the employer match, which is better than nothing, but not a strategy. She talked about money the way people talk about something that is always slightly out of control, something that came in and went out and never quite accumulated the way it was supposed to. I did not say anything. It was not my place, and they hadn't asked. At 32, I hit $100,000 in invested assets. It had taken 9 years. The first $50,000 had taken 6 years. The second $50,000 had taken 3. This is how compound interest works. It starts slow, and then it starts doing the work for you. My net worth at that point, investments plus home equity, was just over $200,000. I taught a lesson that week on geometric progression. I thought about compound interest the whole time and did not tell my students that. Some lessons apply in more than one direction. The moment that made everything visible to the rest of my family happened quietly and without drama. My parents were having a conversation at a family dinner about money stress. My father was looking at retirement in a few years, and the numbers were tighter than he had hoped. My mother was worried about whether they had saved enough. David mentioned that his cost of living in Seattle made saving genuinely difficult. Kristen said she felt like she was always one unexpected expense away from a problem. I sat at that table and listened and did not say anything because it was not the moment for a speech. Later, my mother pulled me aside and asked quietly how I was doing. She meant financially. I could tell by the careful way she asked. I told her I was fine. I told her my retirement accounts were in good shape. I told her I had enough in accessible savings to cover 8 months of expenses without touching investments. I told her the house was appreciating and I had no plans to sell it. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she said, "You planned all of this from the beginning, didn't you?" I said, "Yes." She said, "When you were 22 and chose teaching and have managed this." I said, "Yes." She was quiet for a while. Then she said, "I think we underestimated you." I told her I knew. I told her it was okay. I told her I had not needed them to see it in order to do it. That was the whole conversation. No triumph, no told you so. Just a quiet acknowledgement between two people that a decision made a long time ago had turned out to be right. David asked me a few months later if I could walk him through what I had been doing with my money. He was 34 and starting to think seriously about whether his income was actually translating into anything lasting. I sat with him for 2 hours on a Sunday afternoon and walked him through the basics: index funds, expense ratios, the difference between gross income and net worth, the math on what consistent investing over time actually produces. He was quiet for a while afterward. Then he said, "I've been making 3 times what you make for 10 years, and I have about a quarter of what you have." I said the gap between income and expenses was the only number that mattered. He had a bigger gap than he thought, but he had been filling it from the bottom instead of the top. He started a Roth IRA that week. I helped him pick his funds. Total market index, low fees, automatic contributions. Simple. He is not going to catch up to where he could have been. That math does not work in reverse. But he is moving now, and that is the part that matters. Kristen has not asked yet. She will when she's ready. The door is open. I am 34 years old. I teach high school art in Spokane. I earn $58,000 a year. My investment accounts hold just over $220,000. My home equity adds another $80,000 to that. My net worth is just north of $300,000 and growing every month whether I think about it or not. I still paint on weekends, I still sell prints, I still pick up mural work when something interesting comes along. I do these things because they are part of who I am, not because I need the money, though the money goes straight into investments anyway. I refinished the attic, turning it entirely into an art studio with skylights. Good light, north-facing windows, paint on the floor that I stopped apologizing for years ago. I spend Saturday mornings in that room and I do not think about index funds or expense ratios or safe withdrawal rates. I just make things. The financial life and the creative life are not in conflict. That was the lie I was told at 22. The truth is that the financial discipline I built made the creative life more possible, not less. I am not stressed about money. I do not take work I do not want because I have to. I do not stay in situations that do not serve me because I cannot afford to leave. That is what financial independence actually means. Not retiring at 40 and sitting on a beach. The freedom to make choices based on what you actually want rather than what you can afford. I want to teach art to teenagers in Spokane. I want to paint on Saturday mornings. I want to own a house with a studio and a garden and a mortgage I am steadily paying down. I can afford all of that on a teacher salary in a city my siblings thought was a consolation prize. If you are in a creative field or a helping profession and you have been told your salary makes building wealth impossible, I want you to know that is not true. The tools are available to anyone who starts using them consistently. Open a Roth IRA. You can do this at Fidelity or Vanguard with no minimum balance to start. Contribute whatever you can, even $50 a month to begin.
Choose a total market index fund with a low expense ratio. Set the contributions to automatic so the decision is made once and then made for you every month after that. Do not wait until you earn more. The time is the variable that matters most, and you cannot get it back. The math works on a teacher's salary in Spokane. I am the proof of that.